Captain Jinwoo gripped the armrest of his command chair as he stared at the bright red warning that flashed across his navigation screen. The words, "Quarantine Zone, No Entry," blinked repeatedly in 12 different galactic languages. Behind, those words lay Sector 7G, a region of space that had terrified every known civilization for over 3,000 years. The crew called it Terror Valley, and for good reason. No ship that had ever entered that cursed sector had returned with its crew intact. Those lucky enough to escape came back with stories that made seasoned space veterans wake up screaming in their sleep. Tales of impossible transmissions that drove listeners insane, of energy readings so powerful they could crack planets in half, and of creatures so violent that even the warrior clans of Zerion refused to speak their name. Lieutenant Minji suddenly straightened at her communications console, her scaled green skin turning pale. As one of the reptilian saurid species, she had natural resistance to electromagnetic interference, which made her the perfect communications officer. But right now, she looked more frightened than Jinwoo had ever seen her. "Captain," she whispered, her forked tongue flicking nervously between her lips. "The signals are getting stronger. They're coming in patterns now, almost like they're trying to tell us something. But the language, it's nothing like anything we've ever heard before." Jinwoo had been patrolling the edges of Terror Valley for 5 years now, ever since the Galactic Council had promoted him to captain of the patrol vessel Harmony's Edge. His job was simple: keep curious explorers and foolish treasure hunters away from the Forbidden Zone. It was boring work, but safe work. At least it had been until 3 months ago when the signal started. The ship's science officer, Yuna, looked up from her scanner array with confusion written across her blue-tinted face. As a member of the highly intelligent crystalline species, she could process data faster than most organic computers. When she looked confused, it usually meant something was very wrong. "Captain, I'm reading massive energy spikes from the third planet in that system," she reported, pointing toward the swirling mass of electromagnetic interference that surrounded Terror Valley. "The power levels are off the charts. Whatever weapons they're using down there could turn an entire moon into space dust." Through the main view screen, they could see flashes of light erupting across the surface of the distant planet. Even from millions of kilometers away, the explosions were bright enough to be visible to the naked eye. Some lasted for seconds, creating mushroom-shaped clouds that rose high into the atmosphere. Others came in rapid bursts, like the firing of massive artillery cannons. Navigator Hanul, a young officer from the peaceful Harmony species, shuddered as he watched the display. His people had evolved from creatures similar to Earth dolphins, and violence of any kind made them physically sick. How can any species survive in conditions like that? They must be constantly at war with each other. The electromagnetic storm surrounding the system made detailed scanning impossible, but their long-range sensors could pick up basic information. The third planet was teeming with life forms, billions of them according to the readings. But these weren't normal life signs. The biological readings showed creatures with impossible physical capabilities, able to survive in environments that would kill most known species within minutes. "Look at these atmospheric readings," Yuna said, her voice filled with horror. "Toxic, chemical levels that should make the planet uninhabitable, radiation signatures suggesting recent nuclear warfare, and temperature variations that would freeze or cook most life forms. Yet somehow, they're thriving down there." Captain Jinwoo had read the classified reports about Terror Valley. Ancient survey ships had detected radio transmissions from the system thousands of years ago, but when translators finally decoded some of the messages, the content was so disturbing that the Galactic Council immediately declared the entire sector off-limits. The transmission spoke of global wars, weapons of mass destruction, and creatures so savage that they created entertainment based on violence and death. Lieutenant Minji's equipment suddenly erupted with sound. Voices speaking in harsh guttural languages filled the bridge, overlapping each other in a cacophony of noise. Some sounded angry, others seemed to be screaming, and still others carried tones of menace that made the crew's skin crawl. "Shut it off," Jinwoo ordered, but Minji was already working frantically at her controls. I can't, Captain. The signals are overriding our filters. It's like they're trying to break into our communication system. The voices continued for several minutes before finally fading away, leaving the bridge crew shaken and pale. In all his years of space service, Jinwoo had never experienced anything like it. The sounds weren't just alien, they were actively hostile, as if the very act of listening to them was dangerous. As the patrol ship maintained its position at the edge of the quarantine zone, Captain Jinwoo couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing in Terror Valley. The signals were getting stronger and more organized. Whatever lived on that nightmare planet was becoming more active, and that terrified him more than he cared to admit. Captain Jinwoo took a deep breath and made the decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "Take us in," he commanded, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at his stomach. "Set course for the inner system." The bridge erupted in shocked protests. Navigation Officer Hanul's dolphin-like features twisted with panic as he turned from his console. "Captain, this violates every safety protocol in the Galactic Handbook. No ship has ever returned from Terror Valley intact." But Jinwoo had made up his mind. The strange signals they'd been receiving were too organized, too purposeful to ignore. Something was happening in that forbidden system, and as a patrol captain, it was his duty to investigate. "The signals are getting stronger every day. If whatever's in there is preparing to leave their system, the galaxy needs to know." As the Harmony's edge crossed the quarantine boundary, the ship immediately began to shake violently. Warning lights flashed red across every console, and the familiar hum of the engines took on a sick, grinding quality. The electromagnetic interference grew so intense that it felt like invisible hands were trying to tear the ship apart. Lieutenant Minji clutched her communications console as alien voices began pouring through their speakers in a deafening flood. Thousands of different languages overlapped each other, creating a wall of sound that made it impossible to think clearly. Some voices sounded like they were screaming in pain, others seemed to be chanting in unison, and still others carried tones of pure rage that made the crew's blood run cold. "I can't filter it out," Minji shouted over the noise, her reptilian hands flying across her controls. "It's like they're broadcasting on every frequency at once. Some of these signals are so powerful they're overloading our receivers." The ship's medical AI, a sophisticated computer system designed to monitor the health of all crew members, suddenly began issuing emergency alerts. Its synthetic voice cut through the chaos with urgent warnings. Alert. Detecting impossible biological signatures from planetary surface. Life forms exhibit aggression levels beyond all known parameters. Recommend immediate evacuation from system. Chief Science Officer Yuna's crystal-like skin had turned completely white as she stared at her readouts in disbelief. Her species could process information at incredible speeds, but even she seemed overwhelmed by what she was seeing. "Captain, these readings can't be real. The energy signatures we're detecting from the planet's surface. Some of these weapons are reading at fusion-level explosions. They could literally crack open a planet's core if used in the right way." Through the main view screen, they could see the third planet growing larger as they approached. The night side of the world was lit up like a festival, but instead of celebration, these lights represented constant explosions and warfare. Massive flashes erupted across continents, some creating mushroom clouds that rose high into the atmosphere, others appearing as rapid-fire bursts that suggested artillery bombardments on an unimaginable scale. "Look at the atmospheric readings," Yuna continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Radiation levels that should sterilize all life, chemical pollutants that would poison any known species, and temperature variations that swing from Arctic cold to desert heat within the same regions. Yet somehow billions of life forms are not just surviving, but thriving in these conditions." Navigator Hanul was gripping his console so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. "The gravitational readings are all wrong too, Captain. It's like the planet's mass keeps shifting. And the magnetic field, it's chaotic, constantly changing direction and intensity." The ship's scanners began picking up visual transmissions from the planet's surface, and what they saw made even the bravest crew members turn away in horror. Bipedal creatures, roughly humanoid in shape, were engaged in constant brutal combat. They used weapons that seemed primitive by galactic standards, but were devastatingly effective. Explosions tore through cities, vehicles moved at impossible speeds through war zones, and the creatures themselves showed no fear of death. "They're not just fighting," whispered Communications Officer Minji, her voice filled with revulsion. "They seem to enjoy it. Look at their body language, the way they move. This isn't survival instinct. This is pure aggression." Every transmission they intercepted showed scenes of violence and destruction that defied comprehension. Cities burned while their inhabitants seemed to dance in the flames. Massive vehicles crashed into each other while crowds cheered. Explosions ripped through populated areas, yet more creatures immediately rushed in to continue the fighting. Thera. Ship's computer systems began failing one by one as they drew closer to the planet. Navigation went offline first, followed by life support backup systems. The artificial gravity fluctuated wildly, causing crew members to float momentarily before crashing back to the deck. "Captain, we're losing everything," shouted Engineer Taehyun from his station near the rear of the bridge. "The electromagnetic interference is frying our circuits faster than I can repair them. If we don't pull back soon, we won't have enough power to escape the system." But Captain Jinwoo couldn't look away from the view screen. Despite his fear, he felt compelled to understand what they were seeing. These creatures were unlike anything in the galactic databases. They seemed to thrive on violence and chaos, creating weapons that could destroy worlds while living in conditions that should have wiped them out eons ago. "Just a little closer," he murmured, ignoring the protests of his crew. "We need to understand what we're dealing with." The ship shuddered again as another wave of electromagnetic interference washed over them. And somewhere in the distance, the third planet continued its eternal dance of destruction, completely unaware that it was being watched by terrified observers, who were about to discover that everything they thought they knew about Terror Valley was wrong. Communications specialist Do-hyun had been working frantically at his station for hours, trying to make sense of the chaotic signals flooding their systems. His fingers moved across holographic displays as he attempted to separate the overlapping transmissions into something coherent. Sweat dripped down his forehead as he concentrated, knowing that understanding these signals might be the key to their survival. Suddenly, he froze. His eyes went wide as he stared at his readout, then looked again to make sure he wasn't making a mistake. The pattern he was seeing couldn't be real, but there it was, clear as starlight. "Captain," Do-hyun called out, his voice so quiet that Jinwoo had to lean forward to hear him. I think I've been wrong about everything." The bridge fell silent except for the constant hum of failing systems and the distant crackle of alien transmissions. Every crew member turned to look at the young communications officer, whose face had gone pale with shock. "The orbital bombardments. We've been watching," Do-hyun continued, his voice growing stronger as his confidence built. "They're not attacks. They're celebrations. Look at the timing patterns." He transferred his data to the main screen, showing a complex chart of explosion times and locations. They're synchronized with planetary rotation cycles and seasonal changes. These are controlled explosions for festivals and ceremonies. Chief Science Officer Yuna immediately began cross-referencing Do-hyun's findings with her own sensor data. Her crystalline features reflected the light from her displays as she processed information at superhuman speed. What she found made her gasp in amazement. "He's right," she announced, her voice filled with wonder. "The energy signatures I've been reading as weapons, they're fireworks. Massive, coordinated fireworks displays that can be seen from orbit. And the atmospheric readings." She paused, running the data through her scanners again. "The toxic wasteland shows signs of careful environmental management. These aren't pollution readings. They're the byproducts of massive industrial civilization. But it's all being controlled and cleaned." Navigator Hanul was frantically recalibrating his instruments, his dolphin-like features twisted in concentration. As a member of a species that had evolved in harmony with their environment, he had a natural ability to detect ecological patterns that others might miss. "The cities," he said, his voice filled with growing excitement. "I've been seeing them as craters and blast zones, but they're actually massive urban centers. millions of these creatures living together in structures that reach toward the sky. And the battlefield movements we've been tracking, their transportation networks, millions of vehicles moving in organized patterns. Lieutenant Minji was working to isolate individual transmissions from the flood of signals. As she filtered through the chaos, she began to pick up something that made her reptilian skin crawl with confusion rather than fear. "Captain, I'm getting clearer audio now," she reported. "Some of these transmissions, they're not battle cries or war chants. They're music, entertainment, stories." She looked up from her console with bewilderment. "The violent scenarios we've been hearing? I think they're fictional, made-up stories for amusement." The bridge crew exchanged glances of disbelief. Everything they thought they knew about Terror Valley was crumbling before their eyes. Communications specialist Do-hyun had managed to isolate several video transmissions, and what appeared on the main screen challenged everything they understood about this mysterious species. Instead of savage warriors locked in eternal combat, they saw bipedal creatures engaged in complex social activities. They gathered in massive groups to watch competitive games, created elaborate artistic displays, and seemed to spend much of their time simply enjoying each other's company. "The electromagnetic interference that's been hiding this world for millennia," Navigator Hanul said, staring at his readings in complete shock. "It's not coming from weapons at all. It's the sheer volume of communications from over 8 billion inhabitants. They're constantly talking to each other, sharing information, creating entertainment, and broadcasting it all into space." Science Officer Yuna pulled up a detailed analysis of the planet's surface. "Look at this carefully. What we thought were bomb craters are actually carefully designed urban planning. The devastated landscapes are agricultural areas designed to feed billions of inhabitants. The toxic clouds are weather management systems designed to control climate across entire continents." The most shocking revelation came when Do-hyun managed to decode some of the entertainment transmissions they'd been receiving. The violent, horrifying scenarios that had terrified galactic civilization for thousands of years were indeed real, but they were fiction. Stories created by these creatures for their own amusement. They create horror scenarios for entertainment, Do-hyun explained, his voice filled with amazement. "The wars, the destruction, the violence, it's all imaginary. They seem to enjoy scaring themselves with made-up stories about conflict and disaster." Captain Jinwoo sat back in his command chair, trying to process what his crew was telling him. The most feared species in the galaxy, the inhabitants of Terror Valley who had been quarantined for 3,000 years, weren't monsters at all. They were a thriving, peaceful civilization that happened to have very active imaginations. "But why would they create such terrifying entertainment?" asked Engineer Tae-hyun, who had been listening to the reports while trying to repair their damaged systems. "Maybe," suggested Navigator Hanul thoughtfully, "creating fictional horrors helps them appreciate their actual peaceful lives. By imagining the worst possible scenarios, they remind themselves to be grateful for what they have." As the crew continued analyzing the data, a new picture of the third planet emerged. Instead of a world locked in eternal warfare, they saw a remarkably organized society that had achieved what most civilizations only dreamed of: planetary unity, environmental balance, and the ability to support billions of inhabitants in apparent harmony. The beings they had feared as the galaxy's greatest monsters were actually one of its most successful civilizations, hidden from the universe by nothing more than misunderstood entertainment broadcasts and the sheer volume of their peaceful communications. Captain Jinwoo stared at the main view screen, his mind racing as he tried to process everything his crew had discovered. For 3,000 years, the Galactic Council had maintained strict quarantine around this system, believing it contained the most dangerous species in known space. Now he was faced with evidence that completely contradicted everything they thought they knew. The third planet below them wasn't a war-torn wasteland filled with savage monsters. It was home to a thriving civilization that had accomplished something most species could only dream of: true planetary peace. The readings showed no active military conflicts, no weapons of mass destruction being deployed, and no signs of the constant warfare that had made Terror Valley a forbidden zone. Science. Officer Yuna, Jinwoo called out. Give me a complete summary of what we're actually seeing down there. Yuna's crystalline features reflected the light from her displays as she compiled her report. Captain, this species has achieved remarkable technological advancement while maintaining environmental balance. Their cities are designed to work with natural ecosystems rather than destroying them. They've eliminated most infectious diseases, ended food scarcity, and their energy systems produce almost no harmful waste. Navigator Hano looked up from his station with amazement. Their space technology is impressive too, Captain. I'm detecting multiple orbital stations, lunar bases, and what appears to be preparation for interstellar travel. But all of it is designed for exploration and research, not conquest. The weight of the decision pressed down on Captain Jinwoo's shoulders. According to galactic law, he should immediately report his findings to the Council and wait for official instructions. But something told him that waiting might be a mistake. If this species was as peaceful as they appeared, keeping them isolated served no purpose except to deny the galaxy a potentially valuable ally. Communications Officer Minji, he said finally. Prepare first contact protocols. Standard mathematical sequences to establish intelligence, followed by basic pictographic communication attempts. Minji's reptilian features showed her nervousness as she began setting up the transmission equipment. Captain, are you sure about this? We're violating about 50 different regulations right now. Sometimes doing the right thing means breaking the rules, Jinwoo replied, surprised by his own boldness. Begin transmission. The mathematical sequences went out into space. Prime numbers, basic arithmetic, geometric patterns. These were the universal languages that any intelligent species should be able to recognize and respond to. The crew waited, intense silence watching their communications displays for any sign of response. It came faster than anyone expected. Captain, Minji exclaimed, her voice filled with excitement. They're responding. Perfect mathematical sequences, but they're also sending something else. She paused, working frantically at her console. It's an invitation. They're asking us to establish formal communication. What happened next shocked everyone on the bridge. Instead of the threatening demands or territorial warnings they expected from a species that had been isolated for millennia, the aliens sent peaceful greetings and offers of assistance. They're asking if we need help, Minji reported, her voice filled with wonder. Medical supplies, technical assistance, cultural information. They want to know if our ship is damaged and if our crew is safe. Engineer Tae-hyun looked up from his repair work with amazement. They can tell our systems are failing. Their scanning technology must be incredibly advanced. The response from the planet's surface came through their communication system in perfect galactic standard language. Somehow these isolated beings had learned to speak the common tongue used throughout civilized space. Greetings, travelers from the stars, came a warm female voice. This is Diplomatic Representative Salmon of the United Earth Government. We have been aware of your observation posts at the edge of our system for many decades, and we're honored that you've chosen to make direct contact. Captain Jinwoo felt his jaw drop. They had known about galactic civilization all along. How was that possible? Soman continued speaking, her voice carrying tones of genuine friendship and curiosity. We understand that our entertainment broadcasts may have created some misunderstandings about our species. Our movies, television shows, and fictional stories often focus on conflict and drama because we find such scenarios interesting to imagine, even though our actual society is quite peaceful. Communications Officer Minji was working frantically to establish a proper two-way communication link. Captain, I'm getting a clear signal now. They want to talk directly with you. Jinwoo took a deep breath and activated the communications channel. This is Captain Jinwoo of the Galactic Patrol Vessel Harmony's Edge. We were not expecting such a warm welcome. Salmon's laughter came through the speakers, a sound so genuinely pleasant that it made the entire crew smile despite their confusion. Captain Jinwoo, we've been hoping for this day for a very long time. We know that our entertainment might seem frightening to species that don't understand the difference between fiction and reality. We create stories about wars, disasters, and monsters, because exploring dark themes through imagination helps us appreciate the peace and prosperity we've built in the real world. Science Officer Yuna leaned forward with interest. You mean the violent scenarios we've been monitoring for centuries? They're all pretend. Exactly, Soman replied. We call them movies, television shows, and video games. They're forms of artistic expression that allow us to explore complex emotions and situations safely. We would never actually want to live through the terrible events we imagine in our stories. Navigator Hanel shook his head in amazement. So the galaxy has been afraid of your imagination rather than your actual behavior? It appears so, Somin answered with obvious amusement. We've been trying to figure out how to make peaceful contact with galactic civilization for decades, but we suspected that our entertainment broadcasts might have given the wrong impression. We're actually quite friendly, and we'd love to learn about other species and share our knowledge with the wider galaxy. Captain Jinwoo felt a mixture of relief and embarrassment wash over him. The most feared species in the galaxy turned out to be exactly the kind of neighbors every civilization hoped for: peaceful, helpful, and eager to make friends. The massive conference hall on Earth's orbital station buzzed with activity as representatives from across the galaxy prepared for the most historic meeting in galactic history. 6 months had passed since Captain Jinwoo's fateful mission into what was once called Terror Valley, and the transformation had been nothing short of miraculous. Ambassador Kyung-hee stood at the central podium, looking out at the assembled delegates with calm confidence. Representatives from hundreds of different species filled the chamber, their various forms creating a tapestry of galactic diversity that had never been seen in one place before. Crystalline beings sat next to reptilian diplomats, while gaseous entities floated in specialized containment suits alongside traditional humanoid species. Honored delegates, Kyung-hee began, her voice carrying clearly through the universal translation system. 6 months ago, your species knew us only as the monsters of Terror Valley. Today, we gather as friends and partners in building a better galaxy for all. In the observers section, Captain Jinwoo watched with pride as his former discovery transformed galactic politics. He now served as the official military liaison between humanity and the Galactic Council, a position that had been created specifically to help other species understand human nature. The irony wasn't lost on him that the galaxy's former most feared species now served as peacekeepers and mediators. The transformation had begun almost immediately after first contact. When word spread through galactic civilization that the inhabitants of Terror Valley were actually peaceful, curious, and eager to help, the response had been overwhelming. Delegations from across the galaxy had requested permission to visit Earth, and each group left more impressed than the last. What made humans so effective as diplomats wasn't their advanced technology or military might, but rather their unique ability to understand conflict from all angles. Their entertainment industry, which had once terrified the galaxy, proved to be their greatest diplomatic asset. Ambassador Kyung-hee continued her address to the packed chamber. For thousands of years, we created stories about war, disaster, and conflict not because we enjoyed such things, but because imagining the worst helped us appreciate the best. Every horror movie taught us to value safety. Every war story reminded us why peace was precious. Every tale of destruction showed us the importance of creation. In the past 6 months, human mediators had successfully resolved 3 major territorial disputes that had been threatening galactic stability for decades. Their secret wasn't superior negotiation skills or advanced psychology, but simply their ability to imagine how conflicts could escalate and then work backward to prevent those outcomes. Minister Sung-ho, Earth's chief of interstellar relations, had explained it to a gathering of galactic leaders just the week before. When we can imagine the absolute worst-case scenario of any conflict, we become very motivated to find peaceful solutions. We've spent centuries creating fictional disasters, so we're experts at recognizing the early warning signs of real ones. The galaxy's military leaders had been particularly impressed by human strategic thinking. General Heejin, who had been appointed as Earth's representative to the Galactic Defense Council, had revolutionized their approach to conflict prevention. Instead of preparing for wars, she helped them prepare for peace by identifying potential problems before they became serious threats. Our imagination was our gift to the galaxy, Ambassador Kyung-hee told the assembled delegates. We spent so much time exploring darkness in our stories that we became experts at choosing light in reality. Every monster we created in fiction taught us how to be more human in life. The results spoke for themselves. In the 6 months since humans had joined galactic civilization, the overall conflict rate had dropped by nearly 60%. Trade disputes were being resolved through mediation, rather than economic warfare. Territorial disagreements were being settled through negotiation, rather than military posturing. Captain Jinwoo smiled as he remembered his conversation with diplomatic representative Soman just the day before. She had told him about Earth's latest contribution to galactic peace, a new entertainment exchange program where different species could share their own forms of artistic expression, helping everyone understand each other's cultures better. The most amazing thing, Soman had said, is that other species are starting to create their own fictional conflicts too. The warrior clans of Zerion just released their first action movie, and the Peaceful Harmony species wrote a thriller novel. They're learning that exploring dark themes safely through imagination actually makes them better at handling real problems. The transformation of Terror Valley into humanity's home had become a symbol of hope throughout the galaxy. The quarantine barriers had been removed and replaced with welcome beacons that guided peaceful visitors to Earth's orbital stations. What was once the most feared region of space had become the most visited, as beings from across the galaxy came to learn from the species that had turned their capacity for imagining horror into a tool for creating hope. Ambassador Kyung-hee concluded her historic address with words that would be remembered for generations. We offer the galaxy not just our friendship, but our promise that we will use our ability to envision the worst to help create the best. Our stories of destruction will serve as blueprints for construction, our tales of war as maps to peace, and our imagination of darkness as a guide toward light. As the assembly erupted in unanimous approval, Captain Jinwoo reflected on how a single decision to investigate strange signals had changed everything. The most terrifying thing about humans, he now understood, wasn't their capacity for violence or their ability to imagine horrible scenarios. It was their consistent choice to be better than their darkest thoughts, and their willingness to help others make the same choice. Terror Valley was gone forever, replaced by humanity's gift to the galaxy, the wisdom that came from looking into the darkness and choosing to walk toward the light.